This weekend, I took time out of my busy doing nothing schedule to watch Cuties. What's up, everybody? Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. Okay, before we get started, please make sure to give the video the thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, and also make sure you comment at the point that I get on your nerves so I know exactly when I'm doing it and how to keep on getting on your nerves. So this weekend, I was hanging out with the guy that I'm seeing, and I decided to watch Cuties because I had seen all the hubbub about it. If you've been online at all, if you've been on Twitter, Facebook, anywhere, you know people are upset about this movie Cuties because the marketing on it has been showing young girls twerking and doing things in a sexually provocative manner. That's the best way I can describe it. So I am a person that holds out on outrage. I don't usually get outraged because I feel like the internet a lot of times overreacts to things, and I don't like to overreact, so I'll usually wait and check it out. Like a good example of it was there was a movie called A Day Without a Mexican that came out several years ago. Everybody was upset about it, thought it was derogatory towards Mexicans because of the marketing. Then when I saw the actual movie, I made it to the theater, like not a lot of people did, and it turned out not to be that kind of situation. It actually was very pro-Mexican. So I always hold out on the outrage and see what's going on before I make a real judgment on anything. What ended up happening with this movie is I wanted to be contrarian, and I wanted to be able to be like, no, actually it wasn't sexual at all, or these girls weren't being sexualized. But it really does come down to, it's a movie that does sexualize 11-year-old girls. And it doesn't look natural, it doesn't look cute, there's nothing about it to me that felt right. There's nothing about it where I felt like this movie makes an actual point. And the guy I'm hanging out with, he was also like, I'm uncomfortable right now. And I felt uncomfortable too. And do you know how hard it is to make two gay men uncomfortable when it comes to sexuality? Because there's so much that's hypersexualized in the LGBT or the gay community specifically that we have a different kind of tolerance. So for both of us to be completely uncomfortable and creeped out by this movie really does say a lot. Not just the content of the movie, because the content of the movie itself, or the movie itself, wasn't very good. Just if you take the sexualizing of 11-year-old girls out of it, which I don't know how you really would, but if you take that part out of it, it just arbitrarily wasn't a very good movie. There wasn't really a lesson. I know they were aiming for a lesson, like the way it was described is as a coming-of-age story. An 11-year-old girl meets another group of girls at her school and joins a dance troupe. The dancing was the most uncomfortable part of all of it. The way it was shot was they were trying to make these girls almost look like video hoes, but at the same time, it was very amateur in the way that it was shot, in my opinion. And I just didn't like the movie. There were parts where I saw where they could have gone into a way of like describing the way young girls get sexualized at a young age or are sexualized at a young age. I mean, I saw where they could have made those points, but they missed the mark. There was a point where one of the girls, her name's Yasmin in the movie, and she's a heavy-set girl, just to put it nicely. I don't know what the politically correct term is for that. Pleasantly plump, heavy-set, big-boned, whatever she was. This bigger girl that was hanging out with the crew and then ended up getting ostracized. If you see the movie, you'll know. But there was a point where you hear her puking in the bathroom, and the main character, Amy is her name, is like standing outside of the bathroom, and then the heavyset girl comes out, and I guess that was supposed to be a statement on bulimia and how young girls are forced to believe they're supposed to fit into a certain body type, but they didn't go into it at all. It had no depth at all. Then there was a part towards the end of the movie where Amy wanted to be at the dance. There was a dance contest they were a part of, and she wanted to be in the finals, and that girl Yasmin was supposed to be in the finals, and so Amy snuck behind a corner and ended up pushing this girl in water. Turned out the girl couldn't swim, damn near died. They never addressed that situation. Just all of a sudden everything was okay once the girl held on to a buoy, which who knows, maybe that little girl drowned, and that's going to be part 2 of Cuties, Killer Cuties. What do I know? All I know is this movie was like in comedy, there are comedians that do impressions, but they don't have actual jokes. They just find a way to get into the next impression. So there's never any actual jokes. It's just one setup to get into another impression, to a setup to get into another impression. And that's the way I felt about this movie, but it was kind of with things that you'd be into if you were into little girls. Like, it was just one setup to show little girls in a sexual way, to another setup to show little girls in a sexual way, to another setup to show little girls in a sexual way. That's all this was to me. And I really wish I could come to you guys and be like, no, that wasn't that kind of movie. But it really was that kind of movie. And it made for not only an uncomfortable experience, but not an enjoyable evening of watching movies. We ended up watching other stuff to, you know, cleanse our palate afterwards. But it just wasn't a very good movie. I wish I could tell you guys more about it and really, you know, she was from Senegal. She was in Paris or, you know, France. I don't know if it was Paris specifically, but they were in France. And her mom at the same time was dealing with the fact that her husband was taking on another wife. And there was a little bit of like cultural going on. But it didn't really get into that enough, in my opinion, for it to be worth everything else. Now, if the stuff that they put out was just on the marketing end, and it was like, okay, nobody was going to pay attention to this really important movie otherwise if we hadn't marketed it this particular way. Now, that's something I can get behind, because I know it's so hard to get people's attention during this day and age, because we're inundated with different things, not only as far as media, but as far as news, as far as movies, as far as just in general, we're inundated with things. So I can understand if it was this really great movie, but they just had to use that marketing to make people even pay attention to it in the first place. That's something I can understand, and I wouldn't fault them for. But when you watch the movie and there's just as little substance there as you would imagine there is, it's hard to defend. It's pretty indefensible, in my opinion. And I hear people online going real hard on the fact that this movie was, the director is a black woman, and for some reason that's supposed to make it excusable. But to me, that doesn't make it okay. It still doesn't make it okay. And it's certainly not an excuse for a creeped out movie that has a flimsy plot line and story. I don't know if I'm down with the cancel Netflix situation. I don't pay for my Netflix anyway. For years I paid for Netflix. A friend of mine ended up getting a Netflix when I put out on Facebook, like, if you have my Netflix password, I'm getting ready to get rid of it, so everybody make your other arrangements. And a friend of mine was like, I've used your Netflix for years, I'm not getting rid of Netflix, so when you disconnect yours, let me know and I'll send you my password. So I ended up having Netflix now, so I don't pay for my Netflix, and I'm not going to put pressure on him to get rid of his Netflix because I don't like it. If I want it, I just uninstall it on my TV, but I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to give Netflix the benefit of the doubt and say this one was just a misjudgment in a movie that they chose to buy and now stand behind. That's where I'm at with it. I'm not calling for anybody to boycott. I don't really believe in boycotting things like that. If something's terrible enough, yes. And this was creepy, but at the same time, I don't think that was Netflix's intention with the movie. Because the movie got really good reviews in Sundance. So I think they just thought everybody's gonna love this movie and it's pro-women, and they just really missed the mark. So I'm gonna give it 2 hard thumbs down. That's from Ty Rivera if you want my movie review. Not that anybody asked. Anyway, this has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.